Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about some fighters that I think might start slipping in 2025. A few of them might even fall out of the rankings, and I've got my list ready, and some of you will probably agree and others might come at me with like pitchforks. But hey, it is what it is, so let's get into it. First up, Marlon Cheeto Vera. Now, I like Cheeto, I really do, but let's be kind of real, he's kind of overrated at this point. I know what some of you are thinking, how can you say that? The guy literally got a title shot this year. And yeah, he did, but let's not kid ourselves here, okay? That title shot was gifted. He got it after beating Pedro Munoz, who isn't even ranked anymore. Not exactly a statement win for a title contender, right? Cheeto's resume isn't aging well. And look, if you take a closer look, his resume starts to look a bit shaky. He beat an out-of-prime Dominic Cruz, an aging Frankie Edgar, and Rob Font. Sure, that one's a solid name, sure, but not exactly a killer at this stage of his career. And when he's gone up against true elites of the divisions, guys like Sean O'Malley, Corey Sandhagen, Jose Aldo, Figgy, and Song Yadong, he consistently came up short. And it's pretty clear what the issue is. Cheeto has a wrestling weakness. His striking is sharp, no doubt about it, but his takedown defense, not so much. Against anyone with solid grappling, he's like a fish out of water. Honestly, I think next year is gonna highlight those flaws even more. The only fighter he seems to do well is against pure strikers. And when it comes to well-rounded MMA, he struggles. And look, man, if I were Cheeto, if I were him, I'd avoid grapplers like my life depends on it. Heck, if I were his manager, I'd be double checking his opponents. If they can wrestle, Cheeto should politely decline and stick to striking matchups. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Cheeto is a terrible fighter. That's too harsh. He's skilled, okay, but he's not a true top 5 guy. I think 2025 is going to expose that more than ever. And hey, let's not forget, Cheeto has a solid career, but his takedown defense reminds me of my Wi-Fi signal. It works when it feels like it, okay? Alright, so now let's move on to the next fighter that's on my list, Henry Cejudo. And this one feels a little bit obvious, kind of like the Cheeto one, but let's be real, Henry's comeback hasn't really been great, man. I mean, the guy fought 2 of the best fighters in the division and got folded. And hey, there's no shame in losing to elite competition, but it makes you wonder, does Henry still have that fire he claims to have? After his last fight where he lost to Merab Dvalishvili, he was already talking about retirement. That doesn't exactly scream hungry contender for me. If he does come back next year, I just don't see things getting well for him. Sure, he's Triple C, but let's not sugarcoat it. Henry is 37 years old. For a bantamweight, that's ancient. The smaller guys rely so much on speed and explosiveness, and those are the first thing to fade with age. And look, man, it's not just the age either. He's been on this extended layoff, more focused on his podcast and social media than actually fighting. That's fine if you're transitioning out of the sport, but if you're trying to compete with the killers at the bantamweight, it's a problem, okay? Honestly, I think most of the top bantamweights would beat him if he came back. Yes, even Cheeto. And that's both funny and sad to say because let's be honest, Cheeto's takedown defense is like a wet tissue paper. But here's the thing, Henry isn't really a grinder. He's not that kind of wrestler who's going to chain takedowns and wear someone out. He's more about taking explosive moves and taking risks, which works when he was younger. But now, honestly, it feels like he spends more time yelling and still on his podcast than actually backing it up on the cage. So next up on the list is Kelvin Kattar, and this one feels almost inevitable. Now, let's be real, he's 36 years old now, and his best days seem to be behind him. His last big win was around like 2022 against Giga Chikadze, and since then, it's been a rough road. He's come up short against elite names like Aljo and Max, who dominated him. He also got injured during his fight with Arnold Allen, and was on the wrong end of a controversial decision against Josh Emmett. Looking ahead, it's hard to see things improving for him, especially with his age catching up. I think he still is going to hang around the top 15 for a while. He's good enough to beat guys like Bryce Mitchell or an Edson Barboza, but as far as being considered among the elites, that ship has sailed. That's why I just don't see anything too special for him in 2025, and honestly, I think we're going to see Kelvin Kattar stuck there as a stepping stone for the next hype train. It's tough to say, but the road ahead looks challenging for Kattar. Another fighter that I believe is going to have a rough year in 2025 is Rafael Fiziev, and honestly, I think it's time to say it. He's a bit overrated. Now, don't get me wrong, he's definitely top 15 material, but I don't see him breaking into the top 5, and next year might prove that. Even if he hadn't gotten injured in that fight against Gamrot, I believe he would have lost on points and lost by decision. He's shown vulnerabilities before. He struggled against Justin Gaethje and even RDA. Sure, he got the finish against RDA, but it took him all 5 rounds to do it. And at this stage in RDA's career, he's more of a gatekeeper. So it's not exactly a statement win, you know? It's like barely edging out a Neil Magny victory. It's not really that impressive. And here's the thing, man. Fiziev cardio has never been his strong suit. And honestly, his knockout power gets a bit overrated. As the division keeps getting tougher, I think he's going to struggle more and more. He'll probably hang around the top 15, but I don't see him hitting that elite level people once hyped him up for. By the end of 2025, I wouldn't be shocked if he's not even in the conversation as one of the top guys anymore. Anyways, with that being said, another fighter that I could see potentially dropping out of the top 15 is Jaylen Turner. Turner is someone I initially thought had a lot of tools to be a solid top 10 contender. However, at this point, I think it's safe to say that he's more like the Tin Man of the division. He lacks the grit needed to hang with the best. We saw this in his fight with Moicano, where he dropped him in the first round, but completely dropped the ball by showboating instead of finishing the job, only to get folded in the second round. The same thing happened against Dan Hooker. Turner landed a killer head kick that had Hooker rocked, but instead of capitalizing, he got outworked and broke down. It's becoming a pattern, and it's honestly hard not to question his toughness. Honestly, I'm convinced even I could break Jaylen Turner at this point, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Let's not forget, every time Turner has faced someone with a notable name, he comes up short. He lost to Moicano, Hooker, Gamrot, Matt Favola, and Vicente Luque. That's a tough track record, man, if you're trying to climb the rankings. Sure, he got the physical tools, he's tall, rangy, and he's dangerous when he's on, but it just doesn't seem like he has the mental edge or the ability to rise to the occasion in big fights. Now, don't get me wrong, Turner still got an exciting style and could put on some fun fights. I could see him in entertaining matchups with lower ranked guys or fighters trying to make names for themselves. But as for being a serious contender in the lightweight division, I just don't see it. By the end of 2025, I wouldn't be shocked if he's out of the rankings and more of a gatekeeper than a real threat. Anyways, with that being said, next on the list is Colby Covington, and honestly, I feel like this one is guaranteed. Look at his last 2 performances. He completely froze up against Leon Edwards, and when he fought Joaquin Buckley recently, he looked noticeably slower. And I think it's crystal clear that age is starting to catch up with him. Let's just call it like it is. Most of the fighters in the top 15 would probably beat him at this point. Kobe built a solid reputation on his relentless cardio, pressure, and volume strike, but those tools seem to be fading. Against Leon, he looked hesitant, as if he couldn't pull the trigger when it mattered the most. Against Buckley, he was a step behind and couldn't impose his usual game plan. The division has only gotten better, while Kobe has stayed stagnant, relying on the same style that made him successful in his prime. The truth is, Kobe's window as an elite contender has likely closed. Fighters like Shavkat Rakhmonov, Bilal Muhammad, and many more would probably overwhelm him at this point. Even guys lower in the rankings like Sean Brady or Vicente Luque might be too much for him now. The welterweight division is stacked with younger, hungrier fighters who are evolving their skill set, and Kobe just seems like he can't keep up. With all that being said, Kobe still has name value, and the UFC might keep giving him high-profile fights because of it. He still can sell fights and matchups with veterans or very weak contenders, could keep him in the mix for a little longer. But as far as being a legitimate title threat, those days are over. By the end of 2025, I wouldn't be surprised if Kobe is either out of the rankings entirely or retired. It's the harsh reality of the fight game. Time waits for no one. Anyways, with that being said, next on the list is Renato Moicano, and man, this one hurts to say. I love his gimmick, it's fun, it's unique, and it makes him stand out, but let's be real, he's in a tough spot. The guy just can't afford to lose, but looking at 2025, I don't see how he doesn't. Let's call it like it is. He's arguably beating the 3 biggest soft touches in the division: BSD, Jaylen Turner, and Drew Dober. Those wins were solid for keeping him afloat, but now it's only going to get harder. And from what I'm hearing, he's set to face Beneil Dariush next, and honestly, I think Beneil folds him without much trouble. The biggest issue with Moicano is his striking defense. It's not great. He doesn't move his head, backs up in straight lines, and just eats too many clean shots. Guys like Aldo and Fasiv showed how easy it is to land on him. And someone like Benil, who's technical and powerful, that's a recipe for disaster. And look, I like Moicano, and he'll always be fun to watch. But at this point, the division might just be passing him by if he doesn't shore up his defense and find a way to deal with these top tier opponents. 2025 is going to be a rough year for him. Now, the next fighter we have on the list is Benoit Saint Denis. And there's no easy way to say this. He's in trouble. He's got completely exposed by Dustin Poirier. Not only could he not secure a takedown, but Dustin also played with him repeatedly, going for guillotine attempts, throwing wild, almost cartoonish punches, and still BSD got folded like a lawn chair. Then there's the fight with Moicano, an absolute clinic. Moicano handed him a 10-8 round and delivered one of the most lopsided beatdowns I've ever seen all year at least. Looking ahead, BSD is 100% cooked next year, and I'd say 95% of the division runs through him with ease. He seems like a fighter that's stuck in the wrong era. If this was the early 2000s where one-dimensional fighters thrives, BSD might have found success. You know, back then his style might have worked against less versatile opponents. But now, today, in MMA, where everyone is well-rounded and prepared for every angle, he's out of depth. It's hard to imagine him climbing the rankings, especially how stacked this division is. Now, the last fighter we have on the list is Tai Tuivasa. And let's be honest, the heavyweight division is full of slow, less technical guys in the top 10/top 15, and that feels like Tai's spot now. He's taken a lot of tough losses and been on the wrong end of some brutal finishes. So it's clear where this is heading. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he retires next year. He's been through so many wars and the damage is definitely catching up to him. At this point, I'd only favor him against someone like Derek Lewis, and even that's a toss-up. Here's the thing about Tai though, his style is really fun to watch, but it's also really one-dimensional. He's all about these big knockouts and wild exchanges, but when that doesn't work, he doesn't have much else to fall back on. His striking is powerful, but it's not super technical, and his ground game is almost like non-existent. Against anyone with more complete skill sets or better fight IQ, he is in trouble. Once opponents figure out his timing and avoid his big shots, they can pick him apart or just grind him down. And that wraps up the list of fighters that I think that are going to fall in 2025. Hopefully I nailed it, but honestly I'd rather be wrong about some of these because I actually like a few of these fighters. Either way, we'll see how it plays out, am I right? But what do you guys think? Did I miss anyone? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you agree or don't, I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like always, guys, I'll see you guys on my next one.